Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Self-Aligned podcast, where we bring on researchers, scientists, entrepreneurs, builders of the future, people doing big things with big stories to tell. Today is a podcast with me and Jonathan, co-founders on Epistemic Me. Jonathan's CTO and co-founder. And we haven't done a pod in a while. I've been trying to get the pod systems up and going. So you might have seen some guest interviews while I get the in-person pod situation filled out or figured out. And then now we're reintroducing our Build in Public founders series, like the founders of Epistemic Me and Clarity. So for today, we have a topic which is really interesting: becoming human, goals, information, and the superorganism. The core thesis is human development and flourishing require information from beyond ourselves, from the social and cultural superorganism. Understanding this reframes how we look at aging or personal growth, AI alignment, even as questions about information flow and morphological goals. We're going to talk about in this podcast some of Michael Levin's work, a professor at a Tufts University, his work at the intersection of self-alignment and AI and biology, and then how we kind of take that work and apply that to our technical work and our product work for Clarity, which is our product to help people align their being with becoming their best self. So maybe to start with, maybe Jonathan, could you give me like an overall, just quick summary on what was the Michael Levin paper recently about and what inspired you to think these thoughts? And we're having podcasts on it now.
Right.
And then I'll get into some of the questions we've kind of set up.
Yeah. So Levin and some of his collaborators created this paper. It was like aging as defined by goal-directedness. That's not the exact title, but it's a paper where they did a neural net simulation of a cellular network, like in a tissue system, and they showed that like how you can model aging basically as a function of the cells functioning and communicating with one another. There's a lot of parallels, like Levin and his collaborators have a lot of philosophical overlap with the way that we're modeling the self. In fact, we borrow a lot of inspiration from Levin's work. And so like one example of that is like each cell was a perception action agent. Right. So each cell is acting individually, it's acting towards its own goals, but it's also getting communication from its network of cells as it's working, just like our cells in our body do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, they try to show that like aging can be defined primarily by a lack of goal directness, and that as we're embryos and we have clear goals and clear morphological states that we're supposed to like work through and recapitulating our sort of evolution and ancestry, and then we reach a spot where there's not a goal anymore, and then things just naturally degrade at that point. And from an evolutionary standpoint, that's okay, because like you've already passed on your genes, and like, you know, but now that we're sort of in a different reality than just primarily wanting to pass on our genes, we want to remain healthy, and we want to remain being able to control our aging process more. So it's a really clear, really interesting thesis that like a lack of goal is actually the root cause of aging. And there's some other things that can accelerate it, but that's what they say. What they tried to show in this paper was like, this is the root cause.
And when you say morphological, could you explain what that means?
Yeah, so the paper uses the word morphological quite a bit, and that is the morphology, the shape of your body, what they really mean, like in our bodies as humans, and all chordates, anything that has a vertebrae, has 4 germ layers, and you might have learned this in high school biology. Yeah. And each of the germ layers has cells, and each of those germ layers, the cells communicate with one another. So like a nervous system, the cells communicate through ion channels, and it's like clear how the signals are passed on. That's true for all of our germ layers. Like even our mesoderm, our ectoderm, like our endoderm, they all have connected cells that all have ion channels that talk to one another, just at slower rates.
I see.
So the outer layer communicates the fastest rate, and the inner layer communicates the slowest rate, but they're all interconnected cells. And so as a cell goes through its life cycle, as a cell is born from a stem cell, and it like goes through the process of differentiation, individuation, basically looks at what's the current morphology of this organism, and like, how should I differentiate? Should I be a liver cell? Should I be a blood cell?
Okay.
Like,
what do I want to be when I grow up?
what am I going to be? Yeah. And you can think about like, okay, if I'm a liver cell, like, am I going to be on the inside of the liver or the outside of the liver? And it uses these bioelectric fields to express, express the epigenome and express the genetic information that's relevant, and sort of like to differentiate itself from a stem cell into what it's going to be for its whole life cycle. And then then it plugs into a communication network where it's part of like, you know, this germ layer, or this tissue system in the germ layer. And yeah, Levin has a very precise idea of the word morphology, but there's also like an image in the front of the paper that like shows, the classic like baby crawling to infant walking to, progression. And that's our morphology as we sort of experience it.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned goals and morphology being part of goals.
Yeah.
What other goals might there be in this framework?
Yeah. So, in the morphology framework, like there's basically like, they call them set points, and there's places where like, a hand is trying to become a hand, and I think like we've actually seen pictures of like, a hand having a set point where it sort of like resembles like a reptilian hand in the very early stages of embryo, and then it sort of like starts expressing the genes of the mammalian, or human hands, right?
Got it.
And so each of those set points, it's like all the cells are kind of like getting this goal communicated to them from these global signals that are communicated from the collective information of these communication networks, morphology. And so it's a subjective signal, right? Like each cell like is sensing that goal, and when it like sort of is created, it's born, it's like got this information coming at it and says, hey, this is what we're trying to become right now, help out, and like do your part.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's so interesting on the subjectivity lens, because you're not there saying like grow cell, like come on, become a liver.
Yeah.
You're a collection of these cells, these agents that are making choices. You're maybe making your own choices. So that is an interesting disconnect between like the individual that is being and the beings underneath them,
Right.
almost. So what you're saying is that cells make decisions based on the communication network they're basically part of, getting all these inputs, goal being one of them. Is that through the cellular network that you kind of just mentioned? That's sort of like, that's like, how does that first signal for a goal get propagated? Like, where does that come from?
Yeah. Okay. So there's information in our DNA, right? And the genetic information. And then there's our epigenetics to describe like of that information, what gets expressed at this point in time.
Oh, okay.
So there's all kinds of signals that can turn on and off those epigenetic levers. Like there could be a temperature signal that says like, we're not expressing these genes right now.
I see.
There's a whole set of different things that the cell could be experiencing that like tells its epigenome, like which genes to express at a given point. And what Levin's work has done in particular is pointing out that the cumulative effect of the communication networks is a strong signal for the differentiation. So it's like almost the strongest signal. And what they can do is they can take these embryonic frogs and they can apply bioelectric signals, and they can like determine where an eye will be,
Oh, wow.
born, and they can move things around. Yeah, it's like it's pretty wild. And
That's wild.
yeah. So the thesis is if you
So wait, real quick, they can get a frog and touch it with electricity in certain ways and signal to the frog where they want a limb to grow or something, or an eyeball to grow.
Yeah.
And then it will grow there.
Yeah, they've demonstrated a number of different like animals, especially animals that have like strong regenerative properties that they can like.
Yeah.
Simpler animals.
Wait, that's wild.
Yeah.
So just electric signal, grow eyeball here, and then boom, the frog grows an eyeball there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So and
Holy
like
shit.
it's pretty coarse right now. So they can show that the bioelectric signals like tell the cells where and how to differentiate and what genes to express. But the ideal is that like you could point the bioelectric field like directly to communicate to each cell. Technology is nowhere close to be able to like either measure or control that right now.
Yeah.
So this is
Oh, but one could imagine like if we did have that breadth and depth of control at every cell level, then you could do a lot of cool things. Well, you do a lot of uncool things. But you can do a lot of cool things. Sign me up for the cyborg like era. I'll definitely do that. Okay, so that's really helpful to understand some of the recent work coming out of Levin's lab around goal-directedness and how organisms will take that as a strong signal. Is the goals communicated through the communication network that the agent cell is part of as a strong signal for their own goals to morph into what they need to become to serve the rest of the human body. So let's take this to the human level. So that's cell level, and maybe we can go back and forth between both, but here's a question. So why does retirement often lead to rapid cognitive decline, even in previously sharp individuals? And then this also connects to this other question, which is why does human development take so long? Because other mammals will mature in months or years. Humans take about 27 years for full brain maturation. What are we doing for that long? What's happening? And then boom, like we have Alzheimer's, dementia, like rapid cognitive decline later. Like what's going on here?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's a lot of ways to explain
Yeah.
this phenomenon. It's kind of complex,
Yeah,
multifaceted, I think. But I think humans are special in that we take in a lot of cultural information to adapt, and it's ever since like domestication, say 1.5 million years ago in our hominid ancestry, our nervous system has adapted to communication that we have from cultural information, and it has prolonged infant type behaviors so that we can prolong the period that we collect that information, like how human babies versus a monkey baby, for instance. A monkey baby is much more physically capable than a human baby is.
Yeah.
It's sort of reserving its nervous system to to hear language and to develop patterns, right? And that happens throughout our childhood. And like you said, I think the age 27 is when the prefrontal cortex forms. All during that period, we are shaping our nervous system based on not just internal cues of what the body's telling us, not just bioelectric fields, not just communication networks internally, but the communication networks that are external to our body. And so,
say more about that. Like communication networks external to the body, the self, like me.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, yeah, and this is one way that I interpret Levin's work. And we talk about these 4 germ layers, right?
Yeah.
And like the endoderm, the thing that forms our like heart, lungs, and all core organs, is primarily getting information from internal, inside the body. Whereas like the ectoderm, which splits into the neural crest, gets a lot more information from the environment. And where evolution has learned to do is like use that information from the environment in order to shape us. And this is a lot of the adaptations you see, and a lot of the mutations you see actually come from our nervous system expressing epigenetic patterns that have been finding fitness. And what kind of things find fitness, right?
Yeah.
So language acquisition is one, and we were just talking about a paper of how exposure to the quantity of language and the quality of language from ages 0 through 3 can drastically affect a 3-year-old's vocabulary.
For sure.
Just the repetition and just hearing what was 3,000 words an hour or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was by the end of age 3 or 4. We'll link the paper. I'll maybe butcher this, but ballpark figures, by the age of 3 or 4, a child that comes from a poorer home versus a richer home, like higher socioeconomic status, would have heard 30 million more words. The rich kid would have heard 30 million more words, like exercise, just in daily dialogue, talking to adults, whatever. And there's an argument from Dr. Lisa Philbin Barrett that the amount of vocabulary that you get exposed to shapes your, well, it literally shapes your ontology. Literally, that's your ontology from a philosophical basis, but it also shapes your ability to emotionally regulate, because your ability to emotionally regulate is a function of how robust your ontology is around emotional concepts and experiences that you have, like perceiving other people go through experiences or yourself, tied to emotion concept words. So literally your kid is just based on number of inputs, words, like external to self environment. Just in that one paper, they proved that, yeah, your kid is going to be more emotionally intelligent if it correlates with being less poor. And that correlates with more language used around you. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that entrainment is like literally shaping the connections of neurons and as they are differentiating, and deciding what am I going to be today? And I'm going to be a neuron that goes over here and connects to these other neurons. That's shaped by the environmental information of how many positive affirmations and negative, the training data that the baby's getting from its parents and its surrounding environment.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's funny to think of it as training data.
Well, yeah, it's all training data. I mean,
nobody leaves childhood without some baggage training data. Yep. You gotta go let that shit go.
Right.
Oh man. Okay. So that's interesting. Wait, did you have more to say on that? The whole 27 years for full brain maturation?
Well, I think another interesting example is emotional expression, right? Humans are much more emotionally expressive than almost all other animals.
Yeah.
I think great apes have some ability to communicate emotional expressions, but it's very simple. And it's, again, the facial expressions we use, these are all culturally informed. The reason we move our face the way that we do is because these are things that we see as cues. They're language patterns that we're adopting. And so that's another sort of there's another set of nervous system cells that are individuating themselves for a particular purpose and for communication purpose of communicating emotions.
And that's interesting because that makes me think of the social self from N.L. Seth's work, which is we don't exist in isolation. We exist in respect to others around us, the social self. So would that mean then that we could say humans have developed emotional expression as that has found fitness, I should say? That's skill?
Yeah.
It's not in fitness because it's helped us navigate human life.
Yeah. Have you heard the infant mother song theory of emotional communication?
Tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, apparently there's part of our brain called the anterior insular cortex, which measures your heart and lungs and how they like talk to each other.
Okay.
Kind of like your HRV patterns.
Yeah.
And so it has like kind of a rhythm that it can detect. The theory is that like in early hominids, that there was a survival function of a mother being able to quiet her infant, like no crying baby kind of thing, don't attract the predators, through song. So this is a theory that like, and it found fitness that like the mothers that could communicate to their babies and register that internal function of the insular cortex as an external emotional, like sort of like quieting function was a survival function, and then it got passed on, and that was an infantile sort of adaptation that then extended into adulthood, like a lot of the adaptations that we have. Survived and got passed on, and then proto emotions kind of evolved from there. And
what are proto emotions?
Proto emotions are the word for like like the early ways of expressing emotionality, expressing internal state to in a cultural context. But without like the same kind of clarity, rigor that we're sort of used to today.
Got it. Okay, got it. So yeah, less trained model expressing emotion.
Maybe like more grunting and less gratitude.
Yeah. Right. More grunting, less gratitude. Totally. Yeah, I can see that caveman days. Like, what are you grateful for today? What the fuck am I getting grateful today? You're like making grunts and shit. Like, the saber-toothed tiger stole my food again.
I don't know, but maybe I'm hungry. I'm just not happy right now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so on this, kind of moving beyond this, what is a cell doing? Okay, so you kind of talked about cells essentially processing shitloads of information to be like, what should I do today? What should I become for my human host body? So before understanding humans, we got to really understand what cells are doing at a fundamental level because we're made of cells. So kind of curious what you think about cells as information processors. You kind of talked about reading from the communication network. How are they, like, can you walk me through a cell's decision making like that? Like, how would a layperson hear about the cell life?
Yeah. Right. And I guess for starters, cells are super complex.
Yeah.
Especially eukaryotes, which are what our body is made of. They have extremely complex communication patterns, and even like the best computational biologists in the world say we're like nowhere close to be able to even simulate a cell and how it communicates in its environment. So like there are these little things that you sort of can't see for the most part, like day-to-day life, but they like highly sophisticated. They can take information from other cells like them through like ligands and through microtubules. There's different ways they can communicate with one another and share resources with one another. Nervous cells are the most connected cells in our body, so they like have lots of different connections with other cells. Cells have memory, in various forms. Like there's genetic memory, which carries on, like evolutionary data and passed on, but there's also the epigenetic expression, which responds to the environment. And there's like a number of different sort of like sensory receptors on the cell walls that are proteins that are kind of like responding to things in the environment. And the body utilizes those through endocrine signals, nervous system signals to like, send signals to cells about what should be done. And if you're a cell, the way I think of it is like, you're probably getting a lot of information from like your local tissue network. Like I know a lot about like what the other cells like me are experiencing right now. And if you're like a sensory cell, you may be getting information from the local tissue network, but you also may be getting a lot of information from external environment. And if you think about like rods and cones in your eyes and like, the purpose of those kind of cells, and how they're interacting with like sensory data, so I think a cell in the human body can have a diverse range of subjective experiences, and if you think about what its communication footprint looks like and what like inputs it has to what's given at any given time, it probably varies broadly. And each of these has a life cycle, in terms of what they're communicating with. And so
they have a communication life cycle. Cells do.
Well, cells, just like people, have life cycles, and where they're like, more or less sophisticated through the life cycle. They're in different states and able to communicate different things. One aspect of cell communication that is illustrative is that like cancer cell is actually a cell that cannot communicate with other cells. And it regresses to a more primordial state to where it thinks like, I just have to grow constantly, right? And if you can reestablish communication with that cell and you can reactivate the epigenetic patterns that are like, more like friendly eukaryote communicators, it will get out of a cancerous state into a healthy state.
You can make it grateful instead of grunting. Wow.
Yeah.
It's like sort of harmonious with the world. Little cancer cell, like, we don't guys do this.
Yeah. It'd be like a human going back to like an infantile state you're like crying,
I see.
and then you're like, no, it's like everything's gonna be okay, and it grows back up, and it's like a healthy adult. And so,
Okay, that's interesting.
yeah,
So wait, you mentioned memory. So memory is something you've talked to me about a lot in regards to Michael Levin's work.
yeah,
You want to speak a little bit about that? Like,
totally.
what is memory? How does that serve us to become our best selves?
Yeah, I think this is like a powerful tool in interpreting Levin's work too. So if
Yeah.
you're ever reading his papers, two things I think about. One is that he talks about the bow tie compression pattern. And so, like that, say the form of memory stored in like a DNA or even morphological signals is compressed, right? And like when we retrieve the memory, it gets like expanded in the bow tie pattern and it gets expressed. And so there's like this constant like, compression and decompression going on, and the interpretation of that decompression can be context dependent. So we often think of memory as being like, oh, there's like data stored on a register and we retrieve it and store it and it's always the same every single time.
Yeah.
And Levin says that is not the case with cellular memory. It is like it's compressed in a certain format and then replayed in a certain format. One example he gives is the caterpillar butterfly effect, where you can entrain a caterpillar, to react to food a certain way, and then when it metamorphosizes, it can still access that memory, but it sort of like, because of its conditioning, because of its environment, expresses it differently, and it responds to the environment different ways. And I forget the specifics of that experiment. That's a really interesting one to look up.
Okay,
yeah,
we'll link that in the show notes. So in that instance, it's like caterpillar liked a certain food growing up, became butterfly, remembers that it liked that, but then it pulls the memory and it's a different projection of the memory.
Yeah, has a different meaning.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, those were the days when I was still growing up.
Yeah.
Cool. Not going to try that now. I'm a grown butterfly now.
Yeah.
But maybe not as simplistic, but kind of that vein, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And it's funny you talk about like, I remember when I was a younger butterfly, a little caterpillar.
Yeah.
And so this is a second insight that Levin brings to us, which is a bit more philosophical in nature, but it is that memory can be thought of as a communication from a previous self. So like my younger self left this message for me on this communication channel, and now now it's time for me to retrieve this and then make meaning of it. And that's how he looks at memory, which is a really actually helpful construct that you can then model memory as a communication channel. And I don't think that like the world as a whole has appreciated like how valuable it is to be able to like to look at memory this way and to model it as a communication channel.
Why is it useful to model memory as a communication channel?
Well, I think like information theory, for one, gives us tools that, like that model communication channels, and so we can look at it through that same kind of lens. But I also think if you think about like, oh, okay, my DNA is a form of my ancestors having experienced something, compressed information, and passed it on for like a future self. So I'm actually literally talking to my ancestors who left messages for me, and I'm a new cell in the world, and I'm gonna like find out what I'm gonna do. And the first communications that I have is like, let me just talk to my ancestors and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think it's a way to take in, because biology at large has had trouble making use of evolutionary data and sort of like, making meaning out of it.
Yeah.
And I think these are the type of things that Levin's work brings to the table. And that's exactly what they point out in their papers. There's like this key gap of knowledge where we don't use evolutionary and morphogenetic data, morphological data to like model how cells behave and how the cell networks are formed. And these kind of like these philosophical tools, like the memory instrument is like super helpful for being able to contextualize the data and use it in a way and understand the perception absolute of a cell and like why it's acting why it is.
Yeah. This makes me want to go into like the model of self then, and how we actually model memory and what's happened to you experientially. Do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's one thing in the paper, like, on the second page, there's a picture of the pattern homeostasis.
Yeah.
So like, and every single cell in the body is undergoing pattern homeostasis. It has to maintain its cell wall and its communications, or else it just like becomes, a failure, becomes a risk, a liability to the rest of the organism, right? So in their paper, they modeled the neural networks. Each neural network is an actual like perception action loop. This perception action loop wasn't invented by Levin. It's like sort of a common sense-making paradigm. I think it's more like precisely defined in Carl Friston's work on the free energy principle and active inference. But it's also very familiar to like the military uses OODA loops, and it's the same thing about like perceiving the environment, understanding it, acting accordingly. And the idea that like there's these frequencies by which we kind of like take an environmental action, that we compare it against an internal belief system, that we find out what action we're going to take next, and then we take it on. And the internal belief system, by the way, is encoded in the memory we were just talking about. So the simulation is really cool because it creates cells that all have this perception action loop. They all talk to one another, and they mimic like the tissue networks that are formed in our bodies. As a way of like modeling aging.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So perception action loop. That's basically and we'll put a cool diagram on there for this. Jonathan showed me this right when we first met, actually. So it's funny to think about, because when I think about the origins of this, that is a memory that I have. It's like just that diagram is in my head. But it's this person and what they perceive, and then they go do shit in the world, and the second side of this diagram is the world. And then that's when perception meets reality and feeds back and changes their model. They have now evidence to disrupt or to reinforce the data points, memories that they've had about how something might work. And that's your belief system, as Jonathan was saying. So, okay, that's really interesting. Awesome. And so
I think through that wins, like it's a strong tool for subjectivity. Putting yourself in the shoes of the cell, saying like, what am I seeing right now? What memory is relevant to me, and then what action am I going to take? And that's the action, the choice, if it is, of cell differentiation and of the cell determining like how it's going to like become a certain type of cell. Is one that Levin's work focuses on like the most.
Yeah. I like that. He focuses on what does a cell want to be when they grow up. That's a cool thought to me. We should make a little cartoon of that. That would be such a cute cartoon. What do I want to be when I grow up as a little cell? Very cool. Okay, so now let's move into humans versus cells. Humans, I think all humans think that they're different. Everybody thinks they're a special snowflake, but I also think snowflakes are all made of water. So there's certainly similarities enough so that we can go back and forth on opinions on lots of different things on what it means to be. But yeah, let's go to this. So if aging starts when morphological goals are complete, why don't humans age at puberty when they reach reproductive maturity? Why does our brain in particular take until 27? What does that have to say about the difference between us and other organisms and what it means to be human?
It's conceptually a very complex problem to pull apart, because fitness happens at a population level.
You mean evolutionary fitness?
Yeah, evolutionary fitness happens
at a population level.
At a population level.
Yeah.
And so like a lot of the characteristics that we have are not because like it's going to make the individual more fit, but rather it's going to make the population and the continuation of genes more fit. And I think like sleep chronotypes is a really interesting example of this.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, say more about that while we're on it. Sleep chronotype.
Yeah, apparently we're like a superorganism that emit, like anytime we have a band, a tribe of people together, that like we just never all fall asleep.
That's
because that was a survival function. Particularly I think when we migrated out of trees, and there's we had to stay awake and be able. I think it was actually when hominids got the ability to like make stone tools. Probably crush skulls, right? So you have younger hominids going out to other tribes, and like you had to stay awake, and so so the superorganism of like a tribe can never sleeps. And this has been observed, in even modern tribes that like in usually the older people are the morning larks and the younger people are out at night. But at any given time, there's like 99.5% coverage of time that nobody is asleep. And so like, and you think like, okay, how exactly do we get like relatively 50-50 splits of sex, like being in it, and how do we get like relatively equal splits of sleep chronotypes? How does our cells know this when like mitosis is happening, like that thing we're going to individuate this way? And so there's probably some kind of like population level epigenetics that might be like a really speculatory idea, but like there's more going on than we understand, I think, is what I'm trying to say.
Just from the patterns we're seeing.
Yeah, totally.
Like population level patterns around 50-50, like generally male, female split, and 50-50 chronotype split, like night owl, early bird. This is kind of a funny side note, but Jonathan is a night owl. He'll like sleep at 3 and he'll like do a handoff for me at 2:30 and just put up like, this is what I've gotten done and whatever. And I wake up at 3 and then I read that and then I get about my morning and then I absorb that. And so then it helps like how there's an immediate handoff from when he goes to bed to when I'm awake. And then I'm up for probably 8 hours until he's up. And I give him kind of my handoff of what I've gotten done in the morning and stuff like that. So that's interesting to even think about, like, our startup is a superorganism.
Yeah. Functional superorganism.
We have a functional superorganism startup, the Epistemic Me team. So I can imagine in the future, wait, we probably want to maintain this 50-50 ratio of like night owls, early birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then it makes me also think about maybe more human type questions like, oh, does that impact like the choices of profession that a human might want in life? Like how they're just oriented from a sleep chronotype perspective?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a core metabolic context for how you experience, because it sets your circadian rhythm, and like we may experience the same event at the same time, but be in completely different sort of metabolic circadian states.
That's true.
At that time, just because of our sleep chronotypes. And that was ever present for me, like, having to wake up early and go to high school, like in the morning. It was like, there are people here that are like way more awake than I am.
Yeah.
In first period.
I'm that guy. I was like, I'm up, I'm up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so fucking funny to think about. Oh man. Okay. And is that, you said superorganism, is that an actual term? Is like superorganism is of that variety that is a collection of organisms that just stay up forever?
Like I think we have kind of an ontological deficit, in literature understanding this. Like even I think like, an ant colony being called a superorganism, right? And then calling ants organisms. The opportunity for vocabulary for us to understand, like, how does a superorganism manage homeostasis, and what kind of homeostasis does it manage?
Yeah.
And what do the individuals manage, and what is the actual like gene selection process or like, fitness selection process here? I'd say that biology and science have largely not resolved the conventions and how we look at these things. And so, that's why there's a lot of confusion, I think, in somebody like Levin's work, where he's really talking about cells, but his philosophy is multi-scale.
Yeah.
It's meant to be intracellular. It's meant to be between cells. It's meant to be between organisms, maybe between cultures. Because he's bringing principles to the table that apply, to the problem of a collection coming together, observing a space, sharing information, and then solving a problem together.
Yeah.
And that's how he's defining morphological change, throughout being a human. Yeah.
Because like we could all relate to that, what you just said, which is a bunch of humans get together, try to do something.
Yeah.
Right. That's work. That's like, you go to any team, you build a product, you like try to, back in the day, hunt together and survive and farm together for the first time. Like it's all just humans coming together to do shit. Right. Organisms coming together collectively to have some sort of goal. So that is really cool. Levin's philosophy cuts across all the different scales, intercellular all the way to organism collective.
And that's, if I could expand that a little bit, just
please.
That's the difference between, like the term reductionism has come up, where you'd have somebody who studies cells and they take this privileged view of the world and they say like, this applies across all different scales, like without sort of like, testing it or something like that. Yeah. And there's an analytic process that reduces it to a certain thing. And I think what Levin's work is more like, things like thermodynamics, or, broad principles that apply across scales, that can be applied. And so Levin's taking a non-privileged view in his philosophy of how he applies these sciences, and saying like, look, this goal-oriented behavior, these control theories, they happen at all different scales. And now we're just showing you in this one example, a cellular network, and how control theory applies to the observed aging patterns in that network. But it's a universal, it's a multi-scale sort of, and we want those things. We don't want reductionism. We do want principles that apply across systems, like how we use in physics and how we use in thermodynamics.
Unifying principle.
Unifying principle is a good word.
Yeah. Wait, say more on, we don't want more reductionist theories and we do want more unifying principles. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and this came up in the Vitalist conversation I was having with Mark Hemelian, who runs the he's really got a good head for it.
The Vitalist is a longevity community, with also a lot of venture backing.
Oh yeah, they have a venture arm called Longevity Biotech Fund, and
cool.
Mark works on that. And so, one of his critiques has been about like the what he calls reductionism. And this is when, like a scientist who studies a particular field will say like, we found this pattern, we think it applies to everything, and it explains all of aging, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's one of the I think one of the things that people in biology see in Levin's work is like, oh, this is another reductionist view.
Oh,
and a reductionist view, like in its technical terms at least, is a analytic philosophy pattern. It means that you're breaking something down to smaller and smaller components, and then you may be leaving out some details to like, analyze something at a very small level.
yeah.
And then you say like, okay, now I made this discovery, now it applies more broadly. So you're applying the finding out of context.
Oh, okay.
So that's analyticity, and it's like applying something out of context. And reductionism is largely a pejorative term, a bad word. Like scientists are bad for doing that.
Got it.
We don't want that. What we do want is that we have a synthesis, philosophical synthesis, and we can observe this pattern across different scales, and we can say like, yeah, collectives, work towards goal-oriented behaviors at lots of different scales. And there's a principle here that we can synthesize, and we can reuse this principle and apply it as a lens to interpret how things are happening.
Yeah.
And I think metabolism is another great example. And I think like one thing the field of biology is missing is being able to take those like universal principles and just like apply the lens of metabolism, apply the lens of control theory, apply the lens of thermodynamics, understand how is the system behaving from these things that we know are universal and we know that are going to apply to the system, before we attribute some like super nuanced taxonomy of behaviors that only 3 people in the world understand to describe this behavior, right?
But what if I want the latter thing, Jonathan? What if I want my whole life to only be described by 3 super smart people in the world? I'm kidding. I mean,
that's fragility.
Yeah.
So, the whole thing falls apart.
The whole thing falls apart. This is interesting. So on that, I can't help but ask, like, okay, well, cells got goals. Me and you have goals. Everybody's got goals. So that is really interesting to hear from Michael Levin's work, where it's a synthesized philosophy around goals.
Yeah.
In general, with agents making decisions, whether they'd be cells all the way up to collections of cells making humans, collections of humans making states, nations, etc. So I can't help but ask, all right, so let's tie this into clarity and team clarity, because I feel like there's such an opportunity here. So you have had, I don't know if everybody on the pod knows, but you've been like a 12-time entrepreneur. You've had a lot of reps at how do humans come together to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been through the vehicle of what you started called Team Machine.
Yeah.
And has been a through line and thread in your whole narrative as an entrepreneur. What makes you interested in the goal of aligning teams? And then also, obviously, that ties to AI alignment, because we're all one team on this one. And then tell me about that at the intersection of what you found in the wisdom of this goal framework and quantifying subjectivity there.
Yeah.
Kind of curious about that.
I mean, I think for starters, like we consider ourselves to be individuals, but like, we don't exist outside of the cultures that we're part of, the teams we're part of, like, and so we have these relationships at different scales. Like we have relationships with our family, right?
Yeah.
And there's a vector of health there, and we have relationships with our teammates, and we have relationships with our society and the way that like we might vote in elections, or, our politics. These are all those are all part of us.
Yeah.
Like, so we can't really understand ourselves without understanding like what part it is that we are of these bigger things, And I think that's interesting in itself. But then like once you get to scale, right, and you can see this as humanity's got to get like more and more complex. You have these evolution of like network effects and like marketplaces, right? And so then now I'm a human, and I'm engaging in like a buy-sell dynamic in a marketplace, and there's like normalized attributions of value that are going back and forth. There's supply and demand dynamics that are emerging from these interactions. And even more interesting is representation systems. And I think if you look at the Enlightenment, like it was largely trying to solve like, okay, how do we facilitate capitalism through marketplaces, and then how do we represent ourselves? And I think that the idea of a representation system is like core to human survival on so many levels.
Okay. Wait, tell me more about representation and human survival.
Yeah. I mean, in a sort of community aspect, I think you can picture that like, okay, we have shared resources and we have to find out some way that we're going to manage them, but we also have to collectively like mitigate existential risk. Yeah. When we're solving problems like where are we going to get water from? How are we going to secure our water supply? How are we going to have food for this? These agrarian type of needs. Like, we had to come together. We had to divide up and conquer. We had to discern power patterns and like how people were going to work together. And now that we have these like super advanced civilizations like democracies, the way that we're represented is going to control the resources of our defense systems, right?
Yeah.
Of our military, of our supply chains. Do you know like how many things could go wrong if like we're misrepresented and we don't understand that we need sort of like enough food for the children in the state of California, for instance, or something like that?
Yeah.
You know how many dependencies there are that like political processes are managing, that if like one of them sort of like goes wrong, there might be like a several month lapse in critical supplies of some sort,
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, it's the day-to-day needs, but then it's also like the existential risks, like say diseases, right?
Yeah.
Pathologies, there's education systems. There's so many things that we rely on day to day to like just kind of be able to live the life that we have, and these all are protected, through a representation system, through the political power that a representation system allocates. So I think it's incredibly interesting, and like to really understand representation systems, actually, like I would study, the story of like unicellularity to multicellularity, because multicellularity itself is a representation system. And this is like one of the things that Levin doesn't point out specifically in his paper, but it is effectively going on in these communication networks, is that there are cells saying like, hey, I need this nutrient. And there's tissue systems that are aggregating need and saying, hey, from the blood, I need these nutrients, like for my constituents, right? And our nervous system itself is a system that is like voting through, voltages basically of like, here's what I need. And that's like, and if you look at like the evolution of early chordates in the basal ganglia, you're basically looking at like a resource allocation to facilitate movements. And in like, it's how did that crazy coordinated system evolve from like a bunch of cells who were like colonies, it's through representation.
So representation being the vehicle for information delivery there?
Yeah, I think, representation being, I'm sending information about what my needs are.
Yeah.
Because I'm in pattern homeostasis and I have needs.
Yeah.
And I need to trickle those up, because the things that I can't get by myself, I need to rely on a political process or some collective process in order to provide that to me.
And there's also the view that representation has on itself and how it fits into the bigger picture. So you could call that like Democrats and Republicans. You'd be like, hey, are you just in an echo chamber in one room? Like, are you hearing from other people? So
totally.
Yeah. And you may have a different representation of what other people look like, or what the environment is, or the signals would be, or the information might be. Infinitely complex problem.
Yeah. Interpretation of like what this need signal means, right? Yeah, very complex. And I think those are the kind of things we're like working through to find democratic systems that still work, right? So it's like, it's a really interesting time in civilization where like, well, if we just have like one person who's authoritarian to answer all those questions and interpret the signals, like maybe that'll work better.
Maybe.
Like, yeah. But and that is, I think, like just going back to like what motivates you about this, like, I don't think that we want that kind of, I don't think we want to be, as humans living inside of an authoritarian representation system. I think we want our representation systems to evolve and get to the complexity of, say, where multicellularity took life, right?
Yeah.
Where we can really have that, we have a cultural being, that we're a collective represented in a way that is on an ongoing basis managing its own homeostasis. It's managing existential risks in ways that like protect us all. And I think that comes back to our own health, our own safety, and you can see it in impoverished countries versus how we live. But I think we can be orders of magnitude even more flourishing in terms of health if we can create the right cultural context, called cultural being, to sort of live in. And to me, that's where health goes. That's where morphology goes.
Is creating the representation of self that is high enough fidelity to interrogate. Further,
that I can express my health needs. I can express my complete pattern homeostasis across all pillars of health in a way that represents like what my needs are, who I need information from, who I need resources from, what's globally optimal in terms of the information and resources that we're sharing with one another. What should I do and what should you do in terms of specialization? Yeah, and that like we have protocols for these kind of things that we can all see what globally healthy looks like for all of us, and then like make those trade-offs and like, interpret the representation data in ways that is like, sort of collectively the most healthy for the individuals involved.
So let's talk about that a bit more, because we're on the topic. What are the pillars of self or pillars of health that you would describe? And then let's talk about, in our product, clarity, this is what we aim to solve, is this very hard, how do you quantify subjectivity for the self in respect to your beliefs, evidence for the different beliefs you might have in your belief system, and then with respect to your target self, who you want to become.
Right.
So we've pulled a lot of philosophy and neuroscience and computational biology into that product. And obviously we're talking about it. And I feel like I should tee you up for like, let's talk about how do we define the pillars of self and stuff like that.
This is one thing I found interesting in interpreting the paper Levin and his colleagues wrote, was that they talked about the end of a morphological goal.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, when does it end? Right?
Yeah.
And like we talked about, like maybe the last thing I know about that morphologically changes is the prefrontal cortex, but that's all physical health.
Yeah.
Right. And so all those homeostatic processes, they boil up into like how we kind of think of ourselves as like, am I physically healthy? And of course it happens at different layers. Like you could have organ failures, you could have tissue failures, you could have cellular, and there's a lot of different ways things can go wrong. But physical health is like one of the pillars that we've identified in clarity. Right.
Yeah.
So, but what comes after that, right? Like, and then we make a distinction, whether artificial or not, that there's mental health too, right? But I think that what's healthy about that distinction is it takes on more of like, how do I relate to my environment?
Okay.
And how does like my cognitive capacity and like being mentally healthy relate to the environment that I'm in and the relationships that I have? And am I feeling like in a good place, balanced every day? That's mental health. And so we have nine pillars, right?
Yeah.
And so I think all of these things, all of these pillars of health manage some kind of homeostatic process.
Oh, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's for the human as an individual. That is their executive function.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like career health, for instance.
Yeah.
And it was one that we mentioned. It was
Yeah.
financial health.
Yeah. Those in particular, because we live in capitalism, you have to manage that to manage the other parts of your health, right?
Yeah.
Like you won't have shelter with which to have good sleep, with which to protect yourself, to have good physical health and good mental and emotional health. You probably can't raise a family if you don't have a house either.
Yeah.
The means to do that, to pay for a home and like put food on the table. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the morphology growing into the superorganism, is like, well, all these pillars of health, like how do we connect into culture at large and manage a way that is balanced for both our internal needs and for, and that's what I think, like the morphological set point, I don't feel like it ends. I feel like it just kind of externalizes itself in ways that like are new health vectors to manage. And that like, towards the goals of longevity, like we want to keep like expanding, creating our own set points, creating our own goals for growth, and taking these health pillars and relating to our external environment in ways that are just like continually evolving. And I think along with that, we get to like think, okay, now that I have cultural information about what physical health is, how do I manage myself? How do I manage my tissue? How do I manage organs? And we're already doing some of that with diet and exercise. And then we have technology that's going to, so I think we're sort of able to pull on our entire morphology with how we're evolving, alongside the collective. And that's how we that's how we continue when nature gave us, create new goals, new set points, and continue to grow in ways that we live like healthy, long lives that are like beneficial for us, but also mutually beneficial for the collective.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like when I think, it's hard to think about the civilization level. It's easier to think about like, we're a startup. We have runway, right? We also have individual financial needs, so that there's like some collection of goals as a team and individually where we had to find the perfect Venn diagram overlap. And then if we were both dead, we probably can't go and achieve the goals of the team or the individual. So then beneath that are, these goals around, we need to not be dead. We need to be alive. We need to be flourishing. So then that dictates some of the stuff you might do towards that.
Yeah.
So yeah. And basically I think what you're saying, Jonathan, is, okay, think about that, us as tiny, mighty startup team. And it's already complicated because you got your own life. I got my own life. Like you have your own partnership, like figuring that out. There's a relationship, there's communities, there's friends, there's hobbies, and there's all these other decisions that we have to make towards our own pillars of health, like physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, career, vocational, financial, family, like all these things. And also we have to come together and crush it as a team. So you're saying like bigger picture, if we had this map of the representations that are really high fidelity for every being down to their cellular level, we could probably do some sort of budgeting at the top. We could probably be like, oh yeah, like Robert and Jonathan's main thing here, they like have this economic impact with the rest of the economy through some of these decisions they're making, but they also are solving this big problem. So that maybe like, you know, there could be that sort of like superorganism level budget planning and sort of visioning if we did have those higher fidelity representations. Is that what you're saying? Like,
yeah. And it's kind of like how I describe the complexity of cells and how every cell has a different sort of communication field, different inputs, outputs.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about 9 pillars of health, but you could go into very deep nuance in any one of those, multiple of them. And like
100%.
the shape of what health looks like in a certain team is going to sort of like individuate in the same way that a blood cell individuates differently than a nerve cell or something, you know.
Totally.
Like,
And there's cultural contexts, you know, like gender context, generational context as well, that would just totally inform how you process information, what information means to you, what ontology you have. So yeah, and this gets into like your belief system essentially, and how are those evidenced. So can you talk more about evidencing belief systems and why that's so important to what we're doing with clarity?
Yeah. So I think like if you talk about managing pillars of health, right? It's just like the belief systems are just like we talked about earlier with the cell that is retrieving memory.
Yeah.
You know, I'm retrieving a belief that has served me in the past to apply it to this situation for managing my health today. And in like physical health, I think decision of like, you know, when do I go to bed is like, it sets the context for so much of your day tomorrow. And like, you know, and so like every day you go to bed, you have some history, whether it's your short-term like circadian rhythm, that's the memory, or it's like, you know, your preferences or shows that you like to watch on TV before you go to bed or whatever it's going to be. And so like when I'm managing that vector of physical health, like I can pull beliefs from my past and apply them to present. I can also pull beliefs that are similar to somebody else that like, you know, somebody's like, I'm the sleep king of the world and I've read this really like great program and you can follow it and follow these steps. And you can say like, well, that applies to me and I can adopt those beliefs and I can test them out and I can collect evidence to see if it actually works for me. So I have one piece of evidence that this worked for somebody like me, but now I can collect even more nuanced evidence by going to sleep,
trying it out.
Yeah. Seeing qualitatively how I feel in the morning or whatever my sleep tracker is, how I want to interpret them, and collecting evidence around those. And with that, the belief becomes more evidenced and becomes something that you know is like, oh, you know, if I go to bed 45 minutes earlier, I actually have more energy in the morning when I wake up, as tested over like a 3-month period. And so that's true across all the pillars of health and all the homeostasis that we're trying to maintain.
Got it. Yeah. And that's why evidencing beliefs is so important. And I've actually heard from some clarity users that they would love to see their limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah. Limiting beliefs in the sense that like,
this does not serve me to become my target self.
Yeah.
Right.
Those come up when I say like, I can't do blank, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, maybe you can, right?
Yeah.
Maybe those limiting beliefs are there for a reason, or maybe it's an old construct from a previous self who's been signaling this, but it's actually not relevant in the context that you're at today.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, like it's the nature of that memory system and communicating with previous selves. You have to disambiguate whether it applies in context or not.
Yeah. And you're the ultimate decision maker there, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's why philosophy is such a good tool. Like you should have your own brain, think for yourself as to what would make for a good life for you.
Don't you find that challenging with like all the new tools that we have today? Like where should I demarcate my limiting beliefs? Like, because I couldn't do this thing 6 months ago, but now I can create like lifelike videos and share them with friends. And, you know, and I can do that in like 30 seconds or something like that. And there's all these new capabilities that we're in the midst of that like our great grandparents didn't have this problem.
You know, what's interesting is like, there's that term called suspend your beliefs for a sec. I kind of think in the AI era, you just got to it's constantly just on ice. You just suspend all the beliefs around how software works and just that you're going to have a better time.
Like anything's possible.
Anything's possible.
Yeah.
Now as in particular with the domain we're familiar with from our career, like anything's possible now with AI, right?
Yeah.
Like with regards to making software products better. So like, how has research changed? Well, before you would need to like actually go and do a bunch of fucking research. Now you could accelerate a lot of that with a deep research token. And then you could enhance what you're actually researching in the field, talking to users with more informed questions from activating all of these AI tools we have. Or research can be handed off to design way sooner. Like go talk to a user and then take the transcript from a video recording, throw that into an AI tool, transcribe features, put that into magic patterns with your design system, make a bunch of features like within 20 minutes of the interview, right? And then you could like, send them a link to play with it, add comments to it. And then once you lock that in, you're like, all right, let me ship this off to development. And then you have a way higher fidelity prototype with a high confidence that this would actually win in market now. And then you ship that to dev, right? And then development's like, let me use Claude Code and the latest Sonnet model. And then like, or what you're doing lately, which is using Codex to interrogate our code base and then doing research on how to implement a prototype or design. And then using Claude Code and Sonnet to actually implement the stuff, right? So, and that's probably going to change in like, that's probably in a month, we're going to say something different. So yeah, I think back to what you're saying, like with everything changing a lot right now, I think especially for us being builders of the future, I feel like we just got to suspend belief. And anytime, and I try to do this, like anytime where we're like, oh, we have a resource constraint. Like with the design, we were like, oh, fuck, like Jonathan's spending a lot of his time building stuff. And then do we need like a designer or whatever? And I was like, let's just fucking AI this. And 20 minutes later, we had a solution. We're like, wait a second. Yeah. Whenever we think that we might be resource constrained, we just might not be using the right tool. Because right now there's a proliferation of tools. So good time to be a builder, I feel like.
Yeah. I thought of that, like the article you sent me on the expert generalist from Martin Fowler. Yeah. It was, and so like one of the characteristics of the expert generalist is that it can access the specialist and learn from the specialist when they need to.
Yeah.
And so that's a really like interesting trade-off of limiting beliefs. Because I think with the generalist cap on, you kind of have to be like, anything's possible. I can research this. I have all the tools. And then like, but then at some point you have to say, this might be possible, but there's probably a better way to do it from a specialist. And so let me consult the specialist and see where they're at in this problem and what they think the limiting beliefs are.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of working with these tools that we have today and like finding the trade-offs and specializations that like suit the organization.
Yeah, totally. I like that, which is that persona, basically us, has to suspend a lot of limiting beliefs. You have to believe, especially as an entrepreneur, you got to believe in yourself, right? So yeah, beliefs are very fascinating. We all have them. And whether we choose to recognize them, they're operating our lives, So anyway, that's why for clarity, we focus so much on modeling the self and really getting a high fidelity confidence on your belief system. So that's what clarity helps with to help you become your best self. Okay, so let's talk about that. We talked a little bit about goals, and I kind of want to go into what it means to be human. So you've talked a little bit about identity, individuation of the cell. Do you want to talk to me about what it means to be human and becoming as a human, like collection of cells?
Yeah,
I'm curious to hear about that.
Right. I mean, I think we've been touching on it that like we don't exist with individually, right? We rely on parents when we're young to get us food, to teach us language, to tell us the yeses and the nos of the world, and then it just goes on from there. And I think we have formal education systems. I think about it like if we're continuing this morphologic process and we're continuing the process of becoming, that we through our childhood and through adolescence, we're sort of like forming relationships with new, different, more diverse, bigger types of organizations and finding out like, how is that part of me? Right. And I think that's like, especially in the modern human experience, it just kind of continues on and on through like, like trying to find people that are like you, but then people that are different from you, and then finding groups that of different sizes and that you fit in.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that served probably the baby boomer generation well was to say, let me work through the system and get good grades in school and then like get a job at a big company. And, that's going to be a great life for myself. And I think where our generations, it's kind of like, I could do what my grandparents did, but let me individuate and let me find the circles of people that best facilitate who I want to become. And so I think it's become more of a choice, which is a complete luxury, by the way, in the history of human civilization. But it gives us like these autonomous mechanisms where like self-individuation is actually like setting a set point of a goal of a morphology that I want to become. And yeah, I think like, whether it's graduating college or, working through your 20s, we all kind of feel this, and it feels like you're a little bit lost in a sense because there's not a lot of like, I can't access my memory and talk to my ancestors about this one.
Yeah.
They didn't go through this in the same way that I did. So we're sort of like creating what this world of choice of like how we connect into human civilization should look like, which is it feels kind of messy, but it's kind of a beautiful thing at the same time.
That's interesting. With the Delphi like whole narrative, it's like, well, actually, in a generation, they could talk to their granddad or their great grandpa or whatever. I wonder how that's gonna affect some of this goal setting for humans. Like, because I've met a lot of people that would like that. Like, they'd like to go and talk to a family member that has passed away about some of their goals.
Yeah.
It's like a very like typical sort of case.
Right. And I mean, I think about the types of lives that my grandparents lived and like the knowledge that they would have that'd be like suitable in today's world. And I think I see this more and more too, is like, let's go back to the fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
Like I've seen some thought leaders, go back to adopting Christianity, for instance. And just because like, well, that's what worked for my grandparents and for their grandparents. And I'm just kind of tired of figuring out this whole like, where do I belong thing? And let me take a conservative approach to this and just like do what's worked for humanity so far. And there's something really, really sort of interesting in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of an elegant solution. Yeah. For people, it's like, fuck it. People have solved this. Like,
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. So then these goals, how do you connect that to purpose? Like one's purpose in life?
Yeah. Levin has a specific teleology,
And then could you explain teleology?
Teleology is like the philosophical word for purpose and for change over time. And so, you can go back to like Plato, Aristotle, and like, the teleology of a tree was to become a tree, what's the teleology of a person? And I think usefully we can break this down where teleology is like the change in becoming over time to like, achieve like the goal state. So I think when you look at Levin's paper, there's literally a goal state representation. Those are like teleological steps in the becoming process. And so like from an embryonic point of view, like we are like fulfilling the purpose of like achieving these set points that our genetics, epigenetics, and morphology are setting out for us. Now, if we extend it beyond like the physical form and you start to talk about the things we've been talking about, like, what's my purpose of the relationships that I have, of my place in society, of, these things that we tend to think about a lot. I think it's the same thing. It's the same sort of overarching control pattern I've been talking about. We just have to contextualize what the self is relative to how we define those set points.
I see. Okay. So then the question of do goals equal purpose? It's purpose are just goals, but with more subjective clarification needed.
Yeah. And
within
goals and change in goals over time.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense because I remember I wanted to be an NBA player growing up. And then I went and played basketball, got my ass kicked. Got some evidence that shit's not going to work out, man. I mean, the basketball team in high school and stuff, but there was, after a certain point, I was like, oh, wait, that's how much bigger, faster, better these people are. I got a taste of like playing like a D1 college person.
Yeah.
Wow. And that person is so far away from sniffing a bench in the NBA.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, let's go back to the drawing board. Goals change. Right. And maybe in another life, maybe I could have just Jeremy Linned it or something like that. But in this life, no, it wasn't that. I also wanted to be a game designer growing up. So my first startup, like tech startup, was in gaming. So I got a chance to kind of do that. And then it also revealed to me that game design is not all it's cracked up to be, mainly because in game design, the game studios that win are the ones that design the games to be addicting. So then you're not actually doing what I thought you'd do as little Robert playing video games, having the time of his life. Like, I didn't think, you're not doing the stuff like, oh, let me really imagine this beautiful world that would instigate the imagination of a future child. Like, you're just like, how can I eke out their attention on the pixels that I present in front of them right now? Like, it's actually way more nefarious. So after getting that evidence, I was like, I don't think I want to do that. But I do like that I learned some level of game design. It's a useful skill for general product work. I think it's a useful skill. But man, I had a whole different take on what gaming industry was, and then I was in it, especially mobile games. You're just trying to get people addicted to yours amongst a sea of other addiction pixel things that are out there. So goals change for sure.
How do you interpret younger Robert's expectations and like your achievements? Do you think that you've exceeded them, or
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, that's a great question. I definitely have exceeded my past expectations on many levels. Yeah, for one, I remember I was poor as shit in college, and I had to like finding a bed on the street was a win. That was like jackpot, found a bed, don't gotta buy a bed. Hell yeah. Now that would not be a win. I would not think I'm winning if I did that now. But now what's winning is I have a bed that's mine that I didn't find off the street. I have a roof over my head. I get to work on problems that are interesting to me, not just lucrative, right? So there was a time when I just thought if I could just make 50K a year, like literally, like I had these thoughts in college. I was poor as fuck putting myself to college. I was like, man, at the end of this chemical engineering degree, back when I thought I still wanted to be a chemical engineer, by the way, that didn't happen. But at the end of my chemical engineering degree, I could like get a 50K job for the rest of my life as a chemical engineer. Great. And then I won't have to worry about rent. I don't have to worry about food. I don't have to worry about like, I remember I was just always on it with like the Safeway Just For You coupon. I was just on that shit so hard because I always would have to buy clearance things for food. And so now I'm like, I don't have to do that. I could like buy an expensive acai bowl for 20 bucks. Don't feel too bad about it. Like, wow, what a privilege, right? So I'd say, yeah, I'm more than exceeded younger Robert's goals.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, I think I had pretty lofty goals for myself ever since I was a child. Like, one thing that I didn't get to think about too much for like 20 or 30 years was that as a child, I really wanted to invest my time into like defeating death. I just thought it was like the saddest thing in the world that everybody that I loved was going to die. And I would lose sleep over it as like a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old. And I just thought like, I want to put myself in a position where I can work on that, where I can impact that, where I can have agency over how long I live.
Yeah.
And I think that's just kind of recently coming around where like, oh, these technologies might actually like, give us some chances here. And there's like cultural normalization of the idea of it. And I think that former me would like look at like, oh, you're going to spend some cognition on this in like your mid 40s. And like, that's pretty cool
for sure.
And that kind of appreciation.
He works with Brian Johnson, the guy that's trying not to die. Like, that's pretty cool to have done.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a place where like a lot of this thinking is happening in San Francisco. So yeah, I think like we're in it in a way that's like, it would probably be exciting and,
Totally.
But like I also look back at my previous selves and I feel kind of stupid, right? I think that's a feeling of growth.
Yeah.
Like, man, I was like really just not thinking about that the right way. And like when I was 23 years old or 28 years old or 8 years old or wherever it is. And so like, it's okay to disappoint your previous self as long as you can say that like, I've grown so much.
What do you mean being disappointed by who your previous self was? Like, is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, disappoint your previous self and who you are today.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I think the feeling to look back at your previous self and be disappointed is good. And you just need to recontextualize that as like, that's me growing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
I was such a dumbass before.
Yeah.
I still am. Probably in 10 years, I'll think the same. Yeah. For sure.
And that's the beauty of it. Like if you can look back at yourself 10 years from now and say, man, what a dumbass.
Yeah.
Like what a great feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And the other thing too is like not actually holding that to your identity.
Right.
That's the other thing that actually comes up for me a lot when I coach or mentor people. So I'm kind of curious as a person with also big goals, like, cause my goals have changed. I'm like, I want to help more than 1 billion people become their best selves with clarity. That's kind of our goal for humanity, right? And we also want to help everybody not die as well. That's our AI alignment goal. So as a person that also shares big goals, like startups, you have to have massive goals. Somebody asked me this. They were a high performing venture capitalist. And they were like, as far as I could tell, super fucking successful, like great life, like they've made it. And they were saying to me, I almost live in two worlds where, part of me feels like I've made it. The other part of me feels like there's still so much more to do. And they that latter voice is very heavy
Yeah.
for them. And I've known a lot of founders and entrepreneurs, like high achieving people, that kind of have this problem of not being able to hold both things simultaneously in their heads. And it, like, there's that desire to just grow and become more, and it almost defeats any desire of self-acceptance. Almost. Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it brings to mind that you actually mentioned the Spotify founder and his story.
Yeah.
He was a story of an entrepreneur. He failed out of high school.
Yeah.
Right. He did not do well in high school, but he started a business and sold it for a lot of money. And he was like this 23-year-old with tons of money.
Yeah.
And complete unhappiness.
Yes.
Right.
Super
and he thought that's what he wanted. He thought everything he wanted was to be retired and like, you know, but he didn't know what to do with his time, and he felt empty, and he was attracting people to himself that were like just interested in this rich guy. Right.
Good for him.
Yeah. It was like not healthy. And then he found meaning again by partnering with his Spotify co-founder, by working on it, by having the outlet. And so it's just an example to say, like, the things that you think that you want, like, you know, may not actually take you there. or feel like that when you get there.
Yeah.
And I think the counter to it is just to always be growing. Like, you know, how do you balance that? There's no like material objective. There's no perfect way to spend your time. There's no perfect way to live a life. This comes into the fundamental question of like, what does it mean to live a good life? And if you become too idealistic about it, then, you know, like you're just going to create this idealism that's impossible to be happy about.
Yeah. You won't be happy.
Yeah. But I think there's also something very real about like, I can't afford top ramen for dinner tonight. Right. And so like, it's all about knowing yourself to manage these pillars of health, to find the homeostatic thresholds that you need so that you can be comfortable and you can be expressive and you can, like, you know, really kind of explore, you know, as opposed to like having and I think that is a problem, you know, like for most of humanity historically. And we're kind of at this level of privilege now. We're like, okay, yeah, we've accomplished like most of our hierarchy of needs. We have these homeostatic levels that we can actually choose like what we become next. And that should be a curse, right? It should be a license to like, you know, explore and not to like hold yourself accountable for something. I mean, and sometimes like, if you think in like the most idealistic way possible, like why am I not king of the world, right? Why was I born in a situation where like I don't have control over like whether somebody shoots nuclear missiles at me?
Absolutely everything. Yeah.
Like there's two people or decision-making systems that decide whether the world gets to live or die. And I'm not one of them. And I don't feel comfortable about that.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
You could take that route.
Yeah, you could take that route and you could like be like
perpetually
right,
thinking that way. Yeah.
Whether it's being good looking, whether it's being having a lot of money, whether it's having a lot of power. But I think it's much better just to like continually like realize where you're at and grow and see the growth.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think, that's a lens I put up to rest a long time ago. And I think it served me really well.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Jonathan. On that, to add to your philosophy, because I have a huge drive to grow and become better always. That's why we work well together, because I see you the same. And my answer to this high performing venture capitalist was that it's the whole Sisyphus rolling a boulder up a hill, right? Like it's just that story. We're all Sisyphus rolling this boulder up a hill, gets its up, goes back down, get after it. Like that's life. I've learned is just, life is struggle, and it's also not struggle. It's everything in between. And so we're all rolling that boulder up a hill. And I think perspective is even choice, because I like the existential philosophy of like everything is a choice. Everything you do makes you who you are. You're not who you say you are, but you're the accumulation of what you actually do in the world. So I like that extreme ownership sort of philosophy. And then the end game thinking there for me is, do these things actually, are they at war with each other? The desire to improve, and then that desire overwhelming any sort of self-acceptance or feeling content with oneself. Because there's a philosophical question of like, if you desire to improve, then are you really okay with who you are, right? And I actually look at it a little different. I look at it as, if you don't desire to improve, there's probably something wrong with where you're at, right? Like there's probably something wrong in the conditions of your pillars of self that make it to where you're not desired.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it. So for me, I think back to Sisyphus, choosing to be happy rolling the boulder up the hill, that's what gives life meaning to me, where it's like rolling the boulder up the hill makes me stronger, makes me a better future dad, makes me a whatever, like maybe I'm going to therapy, maybe I'm going through hard times, like whatever I'm choosing to do, that's the struggle. That's part of life. If it makes me better and I try really hard to do it, I try everything I know, I put in all my effort to become the best person I can be, then I gain content from the effort. And I think that's where I got to my philosophy with self-alignment is like, the only thing you could really control is yourself within a certain scope and context, right? Like I can't control that, these nukes, I can't control those. Like we live in the context of there are people that could nuke us. We also live in the context of we got to make money, we got to make a buck to buy rent and survive. So like I don't control capitalism or the economy. I don't control a lot of things, but I do control, do I get out of bed? Am I stoked? Do I do my gratitude practice? Do I hang out with my dog? Do I do my daily stand-up tied to our business outcomes? Like, do I go and live life? And do I try really hard to exercise the habits that make up the identities that are important to me? So like dog dad, important to me. Good co-founder, important to me. Healthy and disciplined, important to me. So forever learner, curious about the world, that's important to me. Like, lots of these other things, like being the best brother or son I can be. And basically my thought is I'm living a full good life if I get to the end of the day and my head hits the pillow and there's nothing else I could have given the day. Like I have given everything I can with the information I have right now on how I could be the best dog dad or the best co-founder or the best entrepreneur or the best wherever learner or whatever. Like I'm putting in all the effort I know how. And I think that's the part that's subjective.
Yeah.
Where only you really know what you're capable of. Nobody else knows that. If you're in a mature state, nobody else knows that really. Like if you're like a kid and you've never ran before and then you're with a running coach, he probably knows your potential for running more than you. But let's say we're all adults and we've lived some reps of life, like me and you. We've had a job, mortgages and shit, have to put food on the table. Like you probably know we're capable of. You probably have a good sense of how much effort can I put into this shit, right? And for me, I take 100% satisfaction and content and happiness in the effort, the striving itself, because I know if my effort and my striving, my struggle to push that boulder up the hill is applied towards the identities that I choose as important to me, that is purposeful. That's a purposeful life to me. So that's my thought is like, they don't compete. Like the desire to improve doesn't compete with the self-love and acceptance that one must have to be balanced. I think that self-love comes from trying really fucking hard to improve oneself to become their best self. Like, I think there's only, to me, it only makes sense to just accept that and then gain content and peace from the amount of effort exercise.
Right.
Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of a thought process though.
I think, and so it's not like, am I achieving this set point, this goal? Like, am I on track? It is like, I'm directionally pointed towards that set point and I'm making as much progress as I can every day. And that's the satisfaction.
Yeah. That measurable part is how much effort could I have put in today?
Right.
And, there's prioritization of effort, there's allocation of effort, but like, there's a qualitative aspect of, I felt pretty good about my efforts.
Yeah.
Like I always go to bed and I kind of think about that. Like I reflect on, my wins and highlights of the day, what I learned today. And those questions help me distill, do I feel like I put in everything today? And if I did, then I feel pretty fucking great about it. Like, and I don't at the same time, I don't look at myself and be like, oh, like I am not this person yet, or I don't have this much money or whatever. I don't look at those things. I just look at that I put in all the effort that I can. I think that's a healthier way to balance that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, that type of growth and that kind of capability creation also creates optionality, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of different, like, opens up possibilities, creates serendipity, it creates like, you might be able to achieve a goal you never even thought of just because like you created new optionality.
Yeah. Like creating new doors that opened.
Yeah.
Like we recently had some for Epistemic Me, which is really great. So when we'll disclose that on the pod in the future. Okay.
I would reflect too that like kind of speaks to the ambiguous nature that we live in, like where there is no
say more on that.
One way to do it. There is, like, I mean, everything's changing so fast. Our environment's changing so fast. Like you can't say like, I have to live life in a certain way. You just have to say, this is the direction that I'm moving. I'm gonna move there as like authentically and, fast growth as I can. Right.
You know what? This reminds me of something. Ben Horowitz, I think I heard him on a podcast. He said something like, a good leader looks into the abyss and sees two terrible options. And he's like, that way's a little less bad. Yeah. I heard that and I was like, that's so true. Yeah. Like, this is actually so true. Because a lot of times it's just like decision making, who gets to be the decision maker. And it's the person who you're trusting with the tribe or collective, like their health. Like, how do we make the best decision of two terrible options? Like, I loved how he framed it. It's like you're constantly looking at the abyss and then making a decision of what's a little less worse to go, let's veer this way. It's a little less worse that way. Less hell this way.
Spoken by a true expert. Right?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about AI, because this wouldn't be a pod without us talking about AI. What is AI really? And let's talk about AI as an extension of the information environment our nervous system communicates with. So in history, we picked up pen and paper. We wrote shit on pen and paper. Socrates wouldn't have liked it, but we've done it.
Plato.
Plato.
Oh, you're right.
No,
Socrates.
it was Socrates. Okay,
Plato was the writer. Yes.
Okay, Socrates was the one that would have not liked any of his writings out. Actually, I'll have discourses here. Yeah. Wait. Oh, and this isn't by Socrates, but anyway, more Stoic writing. Anyway, so we've written to extend human memory. We've printed things to democratize human knowledge, and now the internet connects human knowledge globally. AI compresses and patterns human information in new ways. So talk to me about that, and going from goal-directedness to here, where now we're thinking about, okay, cells communicate through information flow, and they try to maximize that from collective network of communication. Now we talked about how humans are essentially collective networks communicating together, and some of them could nuke us all. And so we're hoping they're getting the best information that says never nuke us all. But tell me more about the correlation to this idea being AI. Like, it's been this evolution of like writing to printing to internet to AI.
Yeah, I guess one interesting thought experiment I had when reading the paper and thinking about like just recontextualizing what it means to become human, right? Through the morphological lens that Levin provides. And like, what if you had perfect information and you had like a perfect simulation or representation of every single person, every single cell, exactly what like the next cell was going to differentiate. You have like, what they're becoming in perfection, right? Like, what would AI alignment mean in that context?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
If we had all perfect information on what we'll become.
Yes. Like, so if you had perfect information on what you're becoming for every single person, and AI you're meant to like design AI in such a way that it like is going to align to what every single person is becoming right now. In this optimal or balanced way. We kind of get back into representation systems. We think about that, but like, but what does it also mean from a subjective experience?
Yeah.
And like, how can I like, and just like you talk about literacy, right? Like, with you brain scans and people that aren't literate, their brains look different than people that are. Like,
okay.
I don't mean people like, people that like, might live in a native tribe where they weren't introduced to literacy, literally hijacks like the visual part of your cortex to like read characters, interpret them, and your brain looks different. And the connections that it made. And now, okay, if we're going to continue to differentiate spells in the presence of like all of the world's literature available to us within single queries that we can interpret, and this is coming closer and closer to from user interfaces to phones that are always on to Neuralink type interfaces, BCIs and stuff like that. What does it mean? How do I change? How do I engage in this like superorganism civilization that these language models are kind of like bringing us into? So yeah, that was like kind of the framing for
Interesting.
How would alignment look in that sense. And I think it gives you like, so if you have a teleological set point for like, how is it that I want to manage my pillars of health? How do I want to show up into the world, right? And how do I want to find like my homeostatic balance and define a set point for where I am today and where I'm going, where I'm becoming, while in the presence of AI. And I think, just like we talked about before, like we have family relationships, we have school relationships, we have team relationships, we have all these kind of different relationships. I think what AI represents is a new type of way to relate to people.
I see.
where how do we want to engage in that, and then how does it sort of look in the way that we want to become. I think it's a really like fruitful way to look at it, where we can model the subjective point of view about like becoming, and like, you know, what it means to each individual to be aligned. And and so I think looking at ourselves as morphological embryos, you know, starting from where we came from and talking to our ancestors and DNA, and then like engaging through these different levels of socialization that shape our nervous system, and then thinking about like how AI is going to shape our nervous system, and both today and tomorrow, is kind of like the alignment exercise.
Interesting. And there's almost like there's going to be enablement problems that come out from this, right? Like this thought experiment. It's like, well, if people have perfect information and there's a gap in what's perfect for them and their ability to execute, there's some enablement function that's got to be created for that.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to think about.
And that's exactly where I think, like, you know, clusters and new representation, like groups, can form, right?
Yeah.
Like there's new data representing that, like, I need to be able to load this data into my context window.
Yeah.
And so I need like access to this data. I need refinement of this data in order to like be able to show up in this class to take this test with this data, you know, coming in my context window, that, you know, like that you could represent that you need that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, we need more sales pipeline.
Yeah. I mean,
like throw that out into the world, sales pipeline fills up.
that's pretty interesting to think about. Yeah. How do I show up in marketplaces?
Yeah.
You know, like given a specific purpose in AI empowerment, like, you know,
Yeah.
how is that?
Yeah, that's so interesting to think about market dynamics and competition in that. Because then, you know, if we did have perfect information across every being on the planet, then there's, I don't know, some infinite equal game we're all playing, right? And then it's like, well, what's the quote best path then, and whose perspective is best? That it would be sort of like humanity or whatever we're becoming.
Right.
What's best for us and what optimizes for empowering that existence and more existence of that new species. I guess that's interesting. That could be a whole pod on itself. It's just, we're just imagining the future of being.
Yeah. I had, because like a cell forms, the cell's a metabolic unit, but it only has access to the materials that are locally available. So like, you know, like the carbon and hydrogen bonds, you know, amino acids and peptide chains and stuff like this, or like the key ingredients. We're now, like, we're getting to a homeostatic context where we basically can say, like, here are my needs, bring me anything in the world from the global supply chain.
Yeah.
And like, I become a global metabolic unit.
Yeah, that's wild to think about.
Yeah. And so what does a civilization look like full of global metabolic units that can like shape the new types of tissues and new types of organs, new types of cells? That's the cultural being that, like, you know, I'm seeing. And look, like, if we don't figure out representation systems that are not authoritarianism, you could say, like, well, I'm one company, I'm gonna own all the robots in the world and have global metabolic units that, like, you know, could fulfill all these purposes, and then the humans will be pets. Or I can figure out representation systems and I can have global metabolic units that are like people that are on their embryonic journey. They have clearly identified purpose. Their purpose is aligned with AI, and then now we're going to empower them in like for all their homeostatic needs on their pillars of health. We're gonna make sure that all the global resources are properly distributed to, like, you know, almost like a bloodstream that's fueling like the collective cultural being, right?
Yeah.
And I like that vision more because I think it's going to protect me from bad things. It's going to protect me from diseases.
Yeah.
It's going to protect me from, you know, astrological events. It'll protect me from natural disasters. Like that's where I think, you know, like we get to be better cells in the organism, right? And I think that's what AI alignment, like, ideally looks like to me, at least at this juncture right now.
Yeah, and I think another part about that is it increases your optionality.
Yeah.
Which is part of being human, is you want more options. You want autonomy, you want to exercise agency. With that comes the inverse, which is having options with which to choose. Right. So I like that. And yeah, I don't like the idea of one megacorp ruling us all. I could certainly say, based on the evidence of my, like, all the evidence I've had so far to inform my belief system, I don't believe that would be a good idea.
Yeah. The suboptimal becoming. The suboptimal human becoming. Yes.
Suboptimal becoming. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So maybe then we can move into, how should I live? So we talked about, you know, what it means to be at a high level. We talked about the pillars of health We can go into this, or if you think there's somewhere else you want to take this to close it out, happy to go wherever you want to go to, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think we inserted like some of our experiences and like, practical wisdom.
Yeah, we could look at, hang on, there's some other stuff here, like rethinking human and AI future. The question isn't just what will AI do? What are we going to do with it? What superorganism are we creating? What information environment will shape future human brains? We have some of those directions we could take it.
Yeah, because we were just kind of alluding to the superorganism a little bit, and then this is like, do I want to be a brain cell or a liver cell?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think like we're all like suited for particular purposes, and we're all different, right? Like going back to the snowflakes,
Yeah.
we are as humans, like
Totally. So yeah, maybe that's an interesting one to pull on this thread, which is on that. Maybe it'd be fun for the pod to hear, what do you think your purpose is in this future of AI and humanity?
yeah. I mean, I've been driven by mitigating existential risk, and I felt like I want to point my career towards that. I want to point my own habits, my daily routine where I wake up and it's shaped by sleep, diet, exercise is like, well, I don't want to die of heart disease. I'm going to mitigate that risk. I don't want to die of cancer. I'm going to do everything in the known and then so on. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that like my purpose is to just continue to like kind of express that morphology, figure things out for myself, figure it out on a small scale, figure it out on a bigger scale, find the knowledge practices and propagate those, be part of the system that propagates those knowledges of like mitigating existential threat. And and like right now it takes I just felt like so privileged yesterday to be able to talk about this paper with some people in longevity communities. Right.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. And
That's great.
I thought like, this is exactly where I want my cognition is to be like, thinking about like what are the strategies that we can take, the technology that is here today, and then mitigate the threats that exist to us, dying. And
Sure.
So I feel really privileged with that. And that's what it looks like today. And who knows what it'll look like, like 10 or 20 years from now. But I think if I just keep expressing that purpose, then, I'll figure it out.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I love that. There's a fist bump. For myself, my telos vector, as Jonathan would say, we have this concept in the Clarity product. It's kind of you would not assume a lot of technical depth, I think, when you think about a personal growth product, because it maybe seems too ambiguous, but we're very first principle thinkers. And especially Jonathan, I want to shout him out as my co-founder. I'm very thankful to have him on here. He's a very scientific mind. And so he applied his scientific mind to the question of, how can we mathematically quantify if somebody is moving in the direction of their target self or not? So he came up with this concept of a telos vector. So using the word teleology for purpose, the purpose of a thing or a being, everybody or being has a telos vector from their current self to their target self within the pillars of self or health that we've identified, like physical health, mental and emotional health, spiritual health, community health, family relational health, financial health, vocational health, like those things. So how is somebody almost sort of self-actualizing towards their target self, their purposeful self? So for me, my telos vector, so to speak, is I've always had this deep desire to just enable everybody on the planet to become their best self. That is such a part of me. Like I feel it manifest whenever I'm like training my dog, to be honest, where I'm like, I just want this little buddy to become the best big buddy he could be. Or like volunteering with kids. I've done a lot of that, like being a mentor or teaching kids. Like when I did the Cambodian Children's Fund, I helped them increase their organizational effectiveness to get more kids from poverty, from the street into their classrooms. So that felt really good because that was like literally empowering more kids to become their best self. So there. And so with Clarity and what we have in store with Team Clarity and Epistemic Me for hyperpersonalization for all AI apps, we're really exercising that part of what I see as my purpose on this earth. Is just, I'm here to try to empower as many people to become their best selves as possible. So I definitely see a through line there with that telos vector and what we're doing with Clarity. So Clarity and then Team Clarity is going to be empowering people and teams to become their best selves. So I'm stoked. We're going to do it. We're doing it. We're living the dream.
Yeah.
So that's great. All right. So in today's podcast, Jonathan and I both talked through Michael Levin's recent paper on goal-directedness, how agents, decision makers, even at the cellular level up to the human level, collections of cells or collections of humans, make decisions and have goals. We talked about morphology and the goal of getting your physiology to a certain degree in being human. Your brain stops growing at 27, but we also explored the concept of purpose and teleology and meaning and what it means to live a good life and be in the sort of pillars of health, of which we have 9 in the Clarity product. Go check it out. It's things like health, physical health, mental health, and emotional health, family health. And we also explored how these concepts at the bleeding edge, like for Michael Levin's lab, at the bleeding edge of, I would say, unifying principles across cellular levels up to collections of people, how at all those levels, there is a unifying model to describe setting goals and acting on them. We'll link that paper. And we talked through how that sort of applies in our philosophy of becoming ourselves as individuals and in the purpose that we find in creating clarity for others to reduce uncertainty in their lives and become their best selves. So this has been awesome. We love hearing from you. So please add YouTube comments, subscribe. That really helps the show to grow it. We're going to get cooler and cooler guests on there, and we're going to be able to just keep creating clarity and the future of Epistemic Me, our main team's name, to help AI alignment. So if you're interested in personal growth, AI, surviving and thriving in this age of AI and building the future, hit subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye. So I think question-wise, some questions that would do well is, I think there are some clips that have done really well where we talk about system interpretability, like machine and human. So maybe I could tee up one for that, and then we could each answer that. Another one could be saying human context protocol. I think just saying that would be good. So how do we, like, I might say something like, how do we solve hyper-personalization in the future, Jonathan? And you might say something like, with human context protocol, and then, explain. So let's do like maybe 3 like that. I just thought of those 2. And maybe actually like a couple clarity related clips could be good. Usually clarity pain points are, do you feel like you're not acting in alignment with your best self? Or do you feel uncertain about anything? Are you feeling anxious lately about every little decision? Like things like that are clarity pain points. So cool. All right. So Jonathan, tell me about system interpretability and why that matters for hyperpersonalization in AI.
System interpretability? Did you mean like human interpretability? Or
Oh, yeah. Maybe we just say, sorry, interpretability.
Okay.
So tell me about interpretability and the role that interpretability plays in hyper-personalized AI for humans.
Yeah, I think the foundation models are trying to introduce interpretability, especially Anthropic, and so that you can understand like why is the model doing what it's doing, and so you can basically see the logic that it's taking on, and like why answer the question a particular way. Maybe you can improve that in the future. We've thought about human interpretability. And so like, well, what can the AI actually understand about the human and what's important to them? And I think that's like sort of like the deepest level of personalization that you can get to, is that like the AI really knows like what you're thinking about, what's important to you, how you can make decisions. Of course, we've modeled this in a belief system structure, and we can interpret this as like the human context protocol for how an AI system can interpret what a human wants, the information that they want, and the decisions they're going to make, what's important to them.
Cool. All right, I'll go. Personalization depends on interpretability, not just of the system from the human, but of the system for the human too. And let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean by that is everybody's talking about context windows and optimizing the context we put into context windows to then engineer a product that somebody will use. But I think about what is the human's context coming into that interaction. So let's say you have an AI health coach and you take a human and you go to it and they say, I want to lose 10 pounds. And then the system has nothing. It's just like, oh, I'll just take that and I'll respond in the best way I can, not trying to know the human at all. It doesn't ask things like, what have you tried already to lose 10 pounds? Why are you trying to lose 10 pounds? Where do you live? Like, what gender are you? How old are you? How fit are you currently? How's your sleep currently? What's your diet like currently? It doesn't ask any of these baselining sort of questions about, am I ready to give a response? And then it just says, here is your training plan for the next 7 days. And here's the diet that you'll eat. Like, it don't even really care where you live. So you could source these things or not. You just got to do it. And it gives you this plan to just do based on one input for an AI health coach from a human. And you could probably ascertain this is not going to be a good response. That human will probably not do anything good with that data, and they're probably not going to execute on that protocol. So having human level interpretability from the system's perspective of the human would mean baselining their belief systems around sleep, diet, exercise. What have you done before that informs how you think about this today? Like, have you tried running? And maybe that's why you hate running. Or maybe you've only tried it wearing flip-flops, I don't know, or something stupid like that. So then, okay, you probably evidence that belief around running based on one particular modality that you've exercised in that with, right? So that's what I mean by system and human interpretability that informs hyper-personalized AI. Okay, let's do another. Let's go with, like, how do you deal with depression? That would be an interesting one. All right, so Jonathan, how do you deal with depression?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had an evolving way to look at depression. And I mean, one of the most interesting perspectives is it's metabolic. You know, you're not getting enough energy to your brain. You can get depressed when you don't sleep enough. And maybe you've heard that you can take something like 20 or 30 grams of creatine, and it improves depressive functions, and it's been like improving things. So number one is take care of your body, get a lot of energy to your brain, give yourself your best chance.
Yeah.
You know, and then I think beyond that, I tend to think that, like, don't take myself too seriously, right? Okay, these are signals. They mean something. Let's figure out what it means. Maybe do some journaling. Maybe figure out, like, okay, what are the thoughts going through my mind? But, you know, like, realize that there's ups and downs, and this is just like one way to do things. And I'll feel differently tomorrow, you know, or I'll feel differently a couple hours from now. And I think taking that perspective that, like, yeah, you're just like an evolving being, and this is a perfectly fine way to feel right now, and you'll probably feel better in the future, and you'll probably feel this way again. You might feel worse. It's all good. It's all part of the experience.
I love that it's all part of the experience. Okay, my answer. I think depression is nefarious because it's invisible. And what I mean by that is, when you go to the gym a lot and you get your cardio in, you get your steps in, you know what the feeling is like when you fall off the wagon and you stop going to the gym for a while, and then you go up your first flight of stairs and you're like huffing and puffing. It's like, wait, this flight of stairs should have been easy, but it wasn't. And so that's your signal that I got to get my ass back to the gym. But what's the signal for your mental health, like around depression and happiness and feeling content and peaceful, versus like just anxious and depressed? Well, that will look very different. It might be, at least from my experience, it might be, oh, getting out of bed kind of sucks today. Oh, I don't really want to do that. Oh, like brushing my teeth and doing the normal hygiene things just have so much weight to them. Or it might be the things that give me joy, like rock climbing or hanging out with my dog or working on things. Like, I might be more burnt out in a depressed state. So those things won't give me joy, because I find that when I am depressed, it's heavier to experience joy. There's more friction to experience joy, even from the things that you know do give that. So how I handle it is, I look at those signals of, am I going down the depression path of mental health, or am I going down the really, like, good, oh my gosh, I am just stoked about life? And on the former, it's going to be, like I just said, you kind of go through life with weights mentally and physically. On the latter, it's going to be like, you go through life and you have rocket boosters and you're just stoked about everything. And you're just also very accepting of yourself. I think that's a big thing, at least for me, just having self-acceptance versus being self-critical quite a bit. Like, the rate of that increases and the rate of self-criticism, drastically decreases. So that's how I think about handling depression and what depression is for me.